Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever set a massive, life-changing goal only to find yourself totally burnt out and right back at square one a few weeks later, you are definitely not alone. The typical approach to self-improvement is to take these massive leaps in as little time as possible. But today, we're going to ditch those overwhelming, earth-shattering goals. Instead, we're diving into the math and science of microscopic, consistent changes, and why getting just a tiny bit better every single day is actually the ultimate secret to success.
Now, check out this number, 37.78. This isn't just a random figure. It literally represents the mathematical reality of compound growth when you apply it to human behavior. Think about it. If you manage to get just 1% better at something every single day for 1 year, the compound effect means you'll end up almost 38 times better than when you started. It's a concept popularized by James Clear, and it completely shifts how we view progress. But how does this actually look in the real world? Well, to answer that, we have to ask, how did the worst team in cycling history suddenly dominate the world? The story takes us back to Great Britain in 2003, when Dave Brailsford was hired as the new performance director for British cycling. And listen, when I say this team was bad, I mean they were historically almost laughably terrible. In fact, top European bike manufacturers literally refused to sell gear to the British team because they genuinely thought it would ruin their brand reputation to even be associated with them. No way, right? Just to put into perspective how deep their struggle was, look at this historical track record of failure. For 110 years, going all the way back to 1908, British cyclists had won exactly one Olympic gold medal. And the Tour de France, 0 wins, ever. The point here is that they were at the absolute rock bottom. So if the 1% rule we're exploring today could work for a team carrying a literal century of failure, it can absolutely work for any of us in our careers, our fitness, or our personal lives.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that Brailsford didn't look for one massive, revolutionary breakthrough to fix the team. That's not how he operated. Instead, he instituted a philosophy called the aggregation of marginal gains. He basically broke down everything that goes into riding a bike and looked for just a 1% improvement in completely unexpected areas. We're talking designing electrically heated overshorts to maintain ideal muscle temp. They rigorously tested different massage gels. They even hired a surgeon to teach riders the best way to wash their hands to avoid catching colds. They brought custom pillows to hotels for better sleep. And get this, they painted the inside of their transport trucks white just so they could spot performance-degrading dust on the bikes.
And all of those tiny, seemingly weird little tweaks accumulated, and the result was absolutely mind-blowing. Just 5 years after Brailsford took over, the 2008 Beijing Olympics happened. The British team didn't just win, they absolutely dominated, taking home a staggering 60% of the available gold medals. They went on to set 9 Olympic records in London 4 years later, and then won 5 Tour de France titles in 6 years. Not through one big sweeping change, but hundreds of tiny ones. Okay, let's dive into this and break down exactly how you can engineer these kinds of results in your own life. In this explainer, we're covering 1. The magic of 1%, 2. The Kaizen Philosophy, 3. The science of small wins, 4. Mastering the 1-3-5 rule, and finally, 5. Surviving the progress plateau. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the magic of 1%, compounding your effort. We know habits act as the compound interest of self-improvement. On any given day, making a choice that's 1% better doesn't feel notable. You probably won't even notice it. But over time, the math takes over. However, we really have to respect the danger of this math because it works in both directions. Contrast the massive gains of positive compounding with the dangerous reality of reverse compounding. If you get 1% worse every day for a year through small acts of neglect, skipping a workout, slightly worse nutrition, ignoring an important email, you erode down to practically 0.03 to be exact. Maintenance isn't neutral. Standing still while everyone else improves is relative decline. Moving right along to Section 2, the Kaizen Philosophy, often called the industrial secret. To truly ground this concept, we need to shift our focus from sports to the historical and industrial origins of continuous improvement, because this isn't just some modern self-help trend, it's a proven operational system. Meet Kaizen, introduced to the wider world by management consultant Masaki Mai. Kaizen is the Japanese philosophy of continuous, incremental improvement, but its true power, that lies in its culture. A Kaizen culture looks for errors in processes, not in people. It embraces rapid organizational learning by testing small changes without this huge fear of failure. Because the changes are so small, the cost of making a mistake is incredibly low, and that builds confidence and serious self-motivation.
And this brilliantly illustrates how those small Kaizen changes aggregate in a business environment. We naturally assume that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3, right? But look at this example from the manufacturing sector. If a company increases its sales by just 1%, increases its profit margin by just 1%, and decreases its overhead costs by just 1%, the cumulative aggregated effect isn't a 3% boost. It is a massive 27% spike in total profit. The exact same aggregation happens in our personal lives when we improve our sleep, our nutrition, and our focus by just 1%.
Next up, Section 3, the science of small wins and why our brains absolutely love progress. So we know the math and the business strategy work, but why does our brain respond so well to this? Let's look at the psychology. Harvard researchers coined the progress principle, proving that making meaningful daily progress is literally the single most important factor for boosting motivation. When you acknowledge a small win, your brain releases dopamine. That's the neurotransmitter linked to learning and pleasure. This chemical reward makes you want to repeat the productive action. Furthermore, as psychologist Albert Bandura noted, these frequent microachievements build your self-efficacy, which is basically your belief in your own capabilities. Every tiny win shifts your identity. Think about it. By writing just 200 words a day, your brain stops saying, "I want to be a writer," and starts believing, "I am a writer." All right, into Section 4, mastering the 1-3-5 rule for practical application. It's time to shift from theory to practice here. How do we ensure we're stacking up these 1% wins every single day without getting completely overwhelmed? Enter the 1-3-5 rule, a fantastic and highly structured time management technique. By capping your daily to-do list at exactly 9 tasks, you completely prevent optimism bias. You know, that human flaw where we assume we can do way more in a day than we actually can. So you start with one large, critical task, tackling it first thing in the morning when your cognitive focus is at its absolute highest. Then, 3 medium tasks, taking about 30 to 60 minutes each. And finally, 5 small admin tasks for the end of the day when your energy is lower. It structures your small wins perfectly.
So, the crucial point is how you actually track those daily tasks. Most people measure forward. They obsess over predicting the future with massive outcome goals, which honestly just causes anxiety. To achieve continuous improvement, you must measure backward. Look at last week's data. Did you only make 2 sales calls? Great, make 3 this week. Measuring backward focuses on the process and simply avoiding tiny losses. Improvement by subtraction, doing fewer things wrong, is often much easier than trying to capture the upside.
Finally, we have Section 5, the progress plateau. Time for a quick reality check. Let's move to and see how this builds into what's called the plateau of latent potential. Because if this is all so mathematically sound and psychologically rewarding, why do so many people still quit their self-improvement journeys? Well, compounding is heavily backloaded, meaning the first few weeks or months of a 1% daily improvement produce almost invisible results. You're doing the work, but the exponential curve just hasn't bent upward yet. Most people quit right here in this valley of disappointment. But early struggles aren't failures. You're simply loading the spring for massive future growth. The results will come for sure, you just have to expect the delay. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful thought from Jim Rohn. The truth is, success is not a singular, earth-shattering event. It's a boring, slow process of daily habits. Habits are literally the compound interest of self-improvement. It's the sum of all those quiet moments when we chose to do things just 1% better, or 1% worse. So I'll leave you with this final, provocative question. Look at the micro actions you've taken so far today. If you tracked them, are they compounding to make you 37 times better? Or are those tiny neglects eroding you down to 0? The choice is entirely yours. Find one tiny thing to improve today and start your own continuous journey. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.